everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Everyday Therapists. I am Kristen Sanders, licensed clinical social worker in Texas and in North Carolina. I'm so glad you could join me for this conversation today with the amazing Larissa Godfrey-Smith of Godfrey-Smith Counseling. She is located in Washington, D.C. and specializes in gender and queer topics. Larissa and I collaborated on a project in Houston many years ago, and she quickly became one of my favorite clinicians ever. She's the kind of person that after you spend time with her, you feel excited, validated, and more hopeful about the world. In this conversation, we talk about gender and queer topics. We also spend a little bit of time talking about a subspecialty of hers, which is body-focused repetitive behaviors. We also talk about why Texas has such amazing queso, but such poor mental health care services. As always, you can get CEUs for listening by going to my website at www.theolivetreecounseling.com. A little bonus treat that I included in the show notes that you get when you download the CEU package is my favorite queso recipe that I have been working on for about a decade. It's pretty good if I do say so myself. So even if you're not in Texas, you can enjoy probably the best thing about Texas, which is delicious queso. And we like to eat that queso to keep us motivated for working to make this world a little bit better place. Thanks again for joining. Hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Larissa. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Kristen. It's good to be here.
I know. I'm so excited to actually talk to you in person. It's been a long time.
It has been. I know. I was thinking about that. It's been like, I don't know, 6-7 years, something like that.
Okay, that's way longer than I was thinking. I was thinking 5, but
maybe it has been. It's been 5 since I moved from Houston, so that sounds accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So we met. You were working at the Mantra Center in Houston, and I was working for communities and schools in Houston. And at my program site, we were asked to do a support group for the queer community on campus. And we called the Mantra Center, as you do in Houston. And they said, great, we'll send somebody out. And they sent you out. And it was like the greatest gift that ever happened to us.
It was so fun. It was the first college safe zones group we had done. So it was very fun. And that age is just so fun. So I really enjoyed it. And you and the staff at CIS there was just so great and supportive. And it was great.
I have very, very fond memories of that time. When I think about my career, I look back, there's different moments, and we had so much fun. We looked forward to it. Those
Likewise.
Were the best, and yeah,
it was really fun
and awkward, and nobody knew what we were doing, and
that sounds absolutely correct for sure.
Yeah. But it was so great because we got to meet you and get to know you a little bit more. And I always credit you for the reason I have tattoos now.
Oh my God. I will take that so proudly. Oh my goodness.
I had never seen the kind of artwork that could be done until I met you. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was an option.
Oh my gosh. That is the best. Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that. I had no idea. Yeah. You've totally made my day. That is fabulous.
That's what got it in my head. I was like, okay, that's happening.
That's awesome.
And not stop.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about where you are now, about your practice. You sadly no longer live in Texas.
No, I miss Houston so much. Yeah, I moved to Washington, D.C. going on 5 years ago now. Life happened, and as much as I miss Texas and Houston, I really like D.C. It's such a fun part of the country, and I love being in a more like dense urban area, and it is so fun being so close to all things politics, but not being in politics.
Yeah, tell us about your practice, and who you see, and
Yeah, I had been doing queer work in Houston, like you said, at the Montrose Center, and that was what I was excited about and knew I wanted to continue doing. And I got a job doing some community work with youth at a community mental health agency here in DC when I first moved. And there were plenty of queer kids, and they sort of funneled, those clients over to me, but I missed doing that all day, every day. And so I was kind of just hanging out and waiting for an opening at any of the queer like counseling centers here in DC. And then kind of just figured, like, why would I keep waiting when I could just sort of open up my own practice and do this myself? And so I did that, started, I guess, at the end of 2019. And so I've had my little one-person private practice gig for, I guess, 2.5, going on 3 years now. No, three, a little over 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, because you started right before I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Started, the week before COVID.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we all started right, before the world changed.
Exactly. Yeah, I had been in an office for just a few months, and was getting right into the swing of it. And then everything shut down and we all went virtual, and office space just sat there for a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So just to back up a little bit, I seem to remember you went to UH Clear Lake.
I did. Yeah. I went to, I started my bachelor's close to my hometown in Northeast Texas, but I wound up finishing my bachelor's at U of H downtown, and then I went to grad school at UH Clear Lake. And it was the clinical psych program. I think it might have a different name now, but I went to UHCL. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And when you went in, what did you think you were going to be doing post-grad?
Surprisingly not. I'm one of the rare ones. Exactly what I'm doing today is what I thought I would be doing. It is not what I thought I would be doing when I was 18 and I went to college. But it is, I knew going into my graduate program, like I remember in my interview saying that I wanted to specialize in queer topics, and, was just interested in working with the community that was still so like young and immature, and sort of the understanding even of like why I was drawn to that. I guess I just knew that I was, and that's what I wanted to do. I don't think I would have known at that time that I wanted to do gender work as much as I do. But yeah, I knew going in.
Mm-hmm. When you went into that program, did they have the kind of curriculum that met that need, or have you had to learn on your own a lot afterwards?
Definitely like on the job, sort of education and training. So I was able, because I really felt connected to working with the queer community, I was able to do, just like course projects and things like that, kind of in that area. But other than that, there was really nothing that was kind of standardized or part of curriculum in that way, other than I think I remember like the multicultural counseling course, there sort of being like a part of that was about queer topics. But it was really through Montrose Center. I did my last year of grad school, my internship hours there, and then was hired on once I graduated and was licensed with my intern license. And so, yeah, I was just able to get the on-the-job training and just loved it. And, since then have just been trying to soak up as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you never turn back. Yeah.
No.
I didn't realize you had also done your internship at Montrose Center. That's awesome.
I did. Yeah, I did. They have a really good structured, counseling internship. And so I did that. And then when I got hired on, though, the opening at the time, if I remember correctly, it was for their HIV case management program. And so I was doing therapy and clinical case management for folks under an HIV grant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think working at community-based centers is so helpful when we start out because we get to see all kinds of people from all walks of life, and you have to just figure it out. Like,
you really do.
We're there to figure it out with them. And so so many of my, even non-social workers, like all social workers, we hit the community-based stuff, but at the beginning, everyone I know who has sort of gone into private practice, but started out right in the community services world. I feel like these are people who know how to handle anything.
I was about to say a crisis comes up and I'm like, oh, we're good. We got this, it feels very like to have lots of those tools in my belt for sure. I think it's such an interesting transition too. This is probably a conversation for a whole other day and maybe you can relate to it, but it is such a strange transition going from community mental health work, at least it was for me, to private practice in regards to like the ethics of payment and, access to mental health care. And I mean, it's just something that I feel like I could talk about for days. And I still am like constantly kind of ruminating on and trying to consistently, I guess, and constantly reevaluate like how the practice is providing care and whether or not that's done in a way that feels aligned with ethics, but also allows me to take care of myself and my family,
Yes, that is a good conversation. Maybe we'll do a little panel.
Yes, right.
People who are with us on this inner conflict because it's real. And I just, for myself, it took me several years of inner work to be able to even consider doing a private practice because of those things.
Yes, same here.
Because I did community-based social work for 15 years.
Wow.
And I went to school at a place that really emphasized community-based service. I mean, I drank that Kool-Aid and really settled into that for many years. And I will say, being in Houston, because I have been in many other large cities and states, but being in Houston is what changed it for me because the community-based mental health structure here is so bare bones that I found it difficult to provide the kind of service that I felt like I wanted to provide in the nonprofit world.
That makes sense.
So
interesting.
It was almost because of where I have been for 10 years now, but I just felt like there weren't the resources here. And that I could possibly provide more on my own, which I do feel like I have.
Absolutely.
But that again is a bigger conversation, and I don't know if you feel like now that you're in a much different type of city. Right. And a very unique type of city. It's hard to compare DC to really anywhere else.
Right. Definitely. Yeah.
But I don't know if you feel like mental health feels different.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Definitely. Well, and in regards particularly to working with trans folks, it's so different. I mean, it's really been an adjustment that took months, first year or so, I think, of really kind of getting used to of the sort of crisis management that I felt like I was doing with trans folks in Houston, where it was so often crisis management. Like we're trying to find housing and, it's like youth and adults that are looking for a place to live or, work and that sort of thing. And here I'm working with kids whose parents are very affluent and affirming and probably queer themselves and just want their kid to have a space to kind of process things on their own. And I'm doing very little education because the parents are pretty well informed. The parents are coming for letters so that their kid can start therapy or pursue a surgery. I should back up so that adults can pursue a surgery. I'm referencing the, 18-year-olds, to get surgeries. And, there's very little question of whether or not that's an okay thing for their kid to pursue. And adults with very successful, high-performing work and, job settings who are in the process of transitioning or did so years ago and just want a space. So it's just so different. Also just structurally, like systemically, it's so different working with clients who have top surgery and their insurance covers all of it, as opposed to Texas where it was just such a struggle to get any coverage and probably wasn't going to happen at all. It's just vastly different.
Yeah. And that's something I like to point out to people because I haven't looked recently, but I would say about 2/3 of clients I see on an ongoing basis are genderqueer, as someone else in the podcast said earlier, alphabet mafia. That's who I have been mostly seeing too.
Nice.
Because that's who I love to work with, and not something I 20 years ago even really was familiar with. So,
interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that was so much of your practice. That's awesome.
Which I go back to that group at Houston Community College in Spring Branch, open that door.
That's awesome.
Like, this is really cool. This
right?
is super interesting.
I know I'm biased, but like queer clients are just queer humans are so fun.
The best.
Right?
Yep. The best. Yes. That's who I want to hang out with.
Yep.
Like if I'm going to be seeing clients 20 hours a week, I make people I want to hang out with.
I had a screening with a new client right before we started this podcast recording. And I was telling her, I was like, I feel like I'm just sort of scamming the system. Like I get paid to talk about like gender all day long. Like it's fabulous. I still don't really know how I scored this.
I know. Whenever people want to talk about it, I'm like, but kind of going back to what I was saying, I often tell my genderqueer trans clients, like, I'm not telling anyone to move. Like, I'm not going to do that, right? People have community, they have connections. Not everyone can move.
Sure.
But I do try to tell them just so that they can have a bigger perspective, like, where we live, especially we're in the suburbs of Houston, this is not like it is everywhere. And I need you to know, like, your experience is real and valid. And if we can expand literally your geographical region by 20 miles, your life experience will be different.
So different. Yeah.
You go 20 miles down 290 into Houston, you will look around and see people that look like you. Whereas where we are,
not so much. No, I love that is where you're working and what you're doing. That makes me so happy.
And then with the mental health system, I'm like, look, I've worked in many states, and I'm telling you, you have a severe mental health issue, like, where can we go?
No, I don't blame you.
It's so much harder. It's just harder. It's just harder. Struggle is so much bigger.
It sounds like you have a lot of experience with different points of view too, which is just valuable. I don't have that. I just think that is so invaluable.
Well, and I try to, I think a lot of the work that we do when you're talking about gender and you're talking about disparities, right? We're talking about systems.
Yeah.
So, and being a social worker, like that's sort of built into my way of thinking, is thinking about all the systems that people are involved in. So, right, when someone comes in the office and they say, I'm feeling this, I'm like, okay, but let's look at all these layers that aren't just about you, right? Like you're not causing your own pain mostly.
No.
Mostly it's the world around you. So can we change that?
Yeah. I'm so with you. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm so happy to be talking to you because now you've been in another place and you have a different perspective. And, you know, a lot of people who spent their careers in Texas, I think, don't realize. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. It's so
hard here.
It's so helpful too. I mean, DC is such a like transient city, and very few people in DC are from DC. And so, you know, so many of my clients, I mean, I think all of them, I can't think of anybody who is a native Washingtonian on my caseload right now, but I guess some kids, but certainly not any adults. But them, you know, reflecting on what's going on in their home states and coming from Texas, I feel like is helpful in, you know, being able to understand some of the nuances there kind of day to day, not just from a distance politically. But it's interesting. DC is a sort of untalked about little bubble that is a safe haven. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah, I imagine that gives you a lot of empathy for people who have come from.
Yes.
Because you could really understand their struggle and how hard it can really be.
Yes, definitely. And we can lament like the lack of really good food that we don't have up here that everybody did in the South. I just need good queso, like anywhere. Come on, people.
Oh, yeah, no, that doesn't happen outside of Texas.
No, it's so sad. Talk about culture shock.
Yeah. My when I was back home, not too long ago, my family wanted to eat Mexican food, and I was like,
you were like, this is cute, guys.
Fine.
No, I'm with you.
Because it's not the same.
No, and you can't say it to Washingtonians. They get very offended, but you're like, food's not very good, guys. There's pockets.
I spent some time in DC right before COVID. I was up there at, I think your office is in DuPont Circle?
No, I'm actually in Noma now. So it's like kind of northeast from Capitol Hill.
Okay. I was up in DuPont Circle for this conference. And I guess I must have like I looked up reviews because I felt like the places I ate were good, but it was just for a weekend. And
DuPont's that is the place to go for some good food. Yeah, no, you did well. It's just, I should give DC more credit. It is just not, it's just different food, and you got to find the right places, and they're out there, but you got to dig, and you can't expect queso. You just can't.
You got to learn to make your own.
Exactly.
I have a good recipe. I'll just send you.
Oh yes, please do. I love it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about digging a little bit more into gender and queer topics, and talk a little bit about what are the things you like to talk about. What are some things that are interesting to you right now? Where do you see things going?
Sure. You know what's the first thing that comes to mind? Kind of answers all of those questions a little bit. I think I love working with youth. A lot of my caseload, you know, for kids, they're around the like 14, you know, sort of age, which makes sense since, you know, that's about when a lot of them are looking to start hormones potentially. And so it's just super fun. And I just love, first of all, like, I just love how queer, like Gen Z and younger, like they're all so freaking fluid. They're so rigid in their fluidity, which is a weird thing to say, but they're just so fluid, right?
What a great way of saying it.
They're like, I am queer, and this is, yeah, they're just, they still got their little mushy frontal lobes, but they're trying things out, and I respect that. And so it's so fun, and I love meeting with those kids and talking about gender and just how it's influencing their relationships and sexuality, and just all the different ways these things are interacting. I love, love, love working with adults that are starting a transition. I have probably like half of my caseload are high performing folks in their career who, pre-COVID and certainly during COVID, started to understand that they needed to work on things related to gender and have started a transition. And it's just, I love the work. I love doing the work with parents trying to navigate this with their kids, at different ages with spouses, and then, workplaces. It's just such an interesting type of work to get to make these really individualized plans for like, this is the order of operations that works best for you when it comes to like socially transitioning and any kind of medical steps and who knows and when and what that looks like. Everybody is so different. It's so nice. This is another thing that's unique, I think, to this part of the country, or, perhaps more urban and like progressive areas, is so many companies have great HR that is like doing that with my client, like they're helping them ensure that they're protected and well supported when they send out the email to their coworkers and things like that. It's just such an interesting experience. The thing that I think is so interesting right now that I'm starting to see more of, and I've been talking with colleagues about this a little bit, is I'm starting to have the young adults who were the babies, the sort of first wave of kids available to get blockers. And so therefore never went through a, adolescence or puberty that aligned with sex assigned at birth and were able to do an affirmed one. And now are in this really interesting place of like, I sort of shy away from the word stealth, but like our stealth out in the world, and nobody knows that they're trans, and they are trying to make the decision on whether or not they want trans to be part of their identity, if they want that to be public. It's just so interesting to me and so different than so much of the work, particularly that I was doing in Houston, but even just a couple of years ago. It's so fascinating to me.
I feel like you're getting to see like the next phase.
Yes, it feels like that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like college students who are on campus and are like, well, like maybe, my peers knew in middle school or elementary or even high school because I sort of socially transitioned at some point in that period. But now I'm, in a new place and nobody knows. And frankly, I don't even really think of myself as trans all that much. And so what do I do now? It's just so interesting. It's a great, I was about to say it's a great problem to have, and it is. And I don't want to minimize the fact that it's a really scary one, safety wise and just anxiety wise, Well,
and it's an issue that people haven't had before. Like no one's
exactly
had that before. And so they're like the trailblazers of that, right?
Yes.
I don't know if calling it post-trans is the right way to say
Seriously,
it,
it's so interesting. Yeah.
But they don't even necessarily want to use that as an identifier.
They're like, it's fine. That's, and it's a very small number of clients that I'm working with. And so I know that this is a really anecdotal sort of perspective. But the few folks that I have right now are all like, like I know that I'm trans, but I just haven't necessarily grown up as thinking of myself as queer kind of first and foremost. Whereas folks that kind of need that for a sense of safety and really attached to it as part of their identity. It just wasn't a need, I suppose, for them.
I wonder how that affects people like in their social communities or dating or
Exactly. That's what it's trying to navigate right now is like, I mean, I have college students who's, nobody knows, roommates, friends, things like that. And they certainly don't need to know. And it's such a potentially important part of identity and history that everybody's trying to find the right balance of like how much of this part of my identity do I want this to be? It's really interesting. And, particularly in the context of college, kids that are coming from all over the country, we can't necessarily assume sort of ideology or level of acceptance. And so there's really a question of safety there as well. It's interesting.
Yeah. There's some really great conversations about identity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Once you've kind of done all the medical social transition, right? That's not really where they are anymore. That's stable. So then it's, well, who am I? Well, that's the great question for all of us.
Exactly.
Who are we? That's like that deeper work that I feel like when people start going through a transition, that's all we talk about for 2 years.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then once life stables out, then we can actually work on the deeper stuff that you tend to work on in therapy.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that people are kind of coming to you and they've kind of already done all of that.
Yeah, it's great.
You get to like, okay, next steps. Like,
well, and it's so parallel to, I mean, so many parts of identity, like you were just saying. I'm thinking about, just any queer person, particularly in regards to sexuality. I mean, I think it's a question that everybody grapples with of, how much of this is part of like how I introduce myself to people, and how public do I want things to be. And it just matters more or less to different people. And I guess we're kind of all figuring out that balance.
Yeah. And I also see that changes throughout time too, right? Like,
yeah,
depending
definitely.
on the age of the person you might be working with. As someone who is solidly in midlife now, right? Like I even see that for myself and my friends my age, right? Like it's like we all have to think about everything again.
God, it's so true. Yeah.
Like at 20, you only have so much information to go on. But by the time you hit 40, you're like, wow, I have so much more information. Let me integrate that. What does that mean?
I was about to say, and not nearly the time to integrate it, right?
That is 100% true.
For real.
Although 20, you don't think you have the time either.
That's a really good point. That's so true. That's so true.
Now,
yes.
I don't, but I know I don't.
Exactly. Very true.
Yeah. What are some resources that you find helpful for learning more about gender and sexuality?
Yeah.
Because this is a constantly changing
field. Oh my goodness, yes.
I talked about with my first guest is also someone who specializes in genderqueer studies.
Nice.
And we talked a lot about how there's not a lot of training. And like if you try to, at least, again, I'm talking about Texas because I'm licensed here, but like when you look for continuing education on this topic,
it's such the bare minimum. Yeah. It's just like, these are the letters.
Yeah. And so for learning more and becoming more educated, as I think we all need to, because this is important. And like you said with Gen Z, like they're all fluid.
Yes.
It's here. It's happening.
Yeah.
Like, get on this train.
Yes. I think it's such a good question too. I mean, I've only been practicing for like 10 years and I don't know about you, but there are so many things, certainly in the first few years of practicing, where you feel like there's perhaps trainings or pieces of information that you just have not accessed or like you haven't sought out, but it doesn't exist. And nobody, like, I don't even know how to quite define what that is. And it varies, I'm assuming, but from sort of specialization and person to person. But I think you can sort of be like, oh, there's like a whole set of training that I'm supposed to have that I haven't gotten. And it turns out that like that doesn't really exist. So I like that the questions being asked and we can sort of acknowledge the fact that there's no cohesive, necessarily kind of standardized training, which maybe is good because queer identities look different in different places. And so, you know, there's a lot of variation with how to train for that, I suppose. So great question. I'm a member of WPATH, which is the World, this is an acronym. This is going to be challenging for me in the morning. World Professional World Professional Association for Transgender Healthcare. I'm 99% certain I'm saying that right.
You got it.
Okay, great. So I'm a member of WPATH, obviously, from how clearly I can state that acronym. And WPATH is the sort of like go-to organization and collection of medical and mental health professionals and system professionals who not only study and research and discuss gender and, you know, provide trainings, but also sort of set the standard for gender affirming care. And so they have, you know, what they call their standards of care. A new one was just released in September, which is really helpful. And so that's kind of what insurance companies and medical providers and so on use and reference to create the standards for how they provide services. WPATH is a historically controversial organization because of the challenges with essentially gatekeeping medical and mental health care. And the trans community is super split on how they feel about WPATH. And I like to be really open and acknowledge that difficulty, while also saying that I find it really important to be a part of WPATH kind of because of that reason. It is kind of the driving force for professional organizations like globally. And there's such good practitioners and they're working so consistently to try to improve and be the most affirming that they possibly can be. And so I want to be a part of that. And I hope that it tells clients that I'm staying up to date with research and training and so on. So through WPATH, there's a journal, International Journal of Transgender Health. I can't remember any of these off the top of my head, but that's a quarterly journal that I find really helpful for keeping up with research. I also subscribe to TSQ, which is Transgender Studies Quarterly. It's a journal that comes out of Duke. And I kind of think of it as like the counterbalance to my WPATH, in that it feels like it's got a lot more street cred, if you will. And it's a different set of academics and things are not always, or frankly, even usually, like medical. It's more, literature and sort of cultural examination of things. There's a lot of great articles there. It's also like very affordable and accessible for people. And so I love reading TSQ as well. And then I just kind of listen to what my clients are reading and watching. Frankly, I cannot keep up with YouTube content. I feel very old. People tell me about channels. I know they're out there and it is just too much content. And so a lot of folks, I keep up with like the main ones like ContraPoints and, if folks have any recommendations or specific ones they're referencing, I'll Google them, but there's a lot of good content out there, which is wonderful. And cannot keep up with all of it for sure. And so a lot of books and novels and things like that, clients are putting on my radar. DC also has a really wonderful queer bookstore that just recently opened. And so it's really nice to not only support this local bookstore, but they have like all these different book clubs and whatnot. And there's some that are gender and trans specific and nonfiction. So point is, there's so much information out there. It's kind of narrowing that down. WPATH also has, and I'm in the process of acquiring what they call a GEI training. And so it's kind of a sort of, there's not a consistent sort of time requirement, I suppose is the way to say it. It's not like you're just sitting down and, going to X, Y, and Z trainings, but there's a whole list of requirements: being a member of WPATH, doing X number of courses, being sort of mentored by somebody who has been doing the work for a while. That all builds up to this GEI certification. And that is really the only thing I know of. It's the most comprehensive and the most concrete and clearly trans, like gender specific training that I'm aware of. So it sounds pretty bland, but it's really cohesive and like thorough, so it feels like a pretty good place to go for it. I will say too, again, these things are can be heated in that WPATH is an organization just like any other. There are dues. These things get really expensive. And so I just kind of want to be transparent about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are really great resources.
Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. And I will link to all of those. Do you know the name
Awesome.
of the bookstore?
Yeah, it's called Little District Books. Oh, I love it. They just opened like last summer. I'm so glad that they're thriving. They just expanded. It's awesome.
We will definitely link to them.
Yay.
For sure. Yeah. We love local bookstores.
Right? It makes me so happy.
Missing.
I know, right? How is that not happening? Oh my goodness.
There's a lot of like used bookstores, but
yeah,
that's kind of a different vibe.
We definitely don't have the used bookstore presence up here, which is there's no half price. And that makes me very sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I like to go to Austin for book shopping.
Nice.
Bookstores in Austin.
Right.
That's when I hit up some bookstores. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, those are really great resources. The other one that I wanted to mention, because you just presented, I will have to say Houston does have one fantastic organization, the Gender Infinity Conference.
Yay.
Which was my first sort of jump into this topic post grad school. So when I first started working in Houston at the community college, I had a trans client I was working with, and I'm like, gosh, it's been a long time since I've done any training.
Sure.
A long time, and it's all changed since the early 2000s when I was in school. So I found the Gender Infinity Conference, and it might have been their second year or third. It was when it was still in Clear Lake.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to it and I was like, wow, this is the best conference I've ever been to, because I learned more in that conference maybe than I have in my whole life. Like,
that's
so
awesome.
So over the years, I would try to go to that conference, when they had it, and they did it virtually for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I guess they were back in person this year.
They did kind of a half and half. Like the professional part was still virtual. And so I was able to present. I didn't have to leave my office. But then the family day was in person, is my understanding.
Got it. Yeah. So you got to present. What did you present?
I did. I think the name of the presentation was something along the lines of examining gender euphoria. No. That's a lie. Examining gender dysphoria in clients and fostering euphoria. And so it was, right? Thank you. And it was a really fun discussion about sort of different types of gender dysphoria, which I don't necessarily know that we are clearly talking about on a regular basis. And there's not a ton of research or really clear, consistent kind of perspectives on it. And so we talked about different categories of gender dysphoria. So like social or physical, that kind of bodily, as well as like legal. And so that, but then really kind of flipping and rather than focusing so much on the symptoms, trying to really find creative ways to foster euphoria for clients and really connect with this idea of gender joy, which even if we're not trans, we can all connect with. We've all had moments and experience probably day to day, week to week moments that we feel more or less affirmed in our gender. And so really kind of taking some time to reflect on that as, you know, just individual practitioners in hopes that we'll find creative ways to talk about it with our clients as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That sounds
it
like
was really
such great
fun.
training.
It was so fun. I really enjoyed it.
I had already, I feel like they always announce it kind of late because I'm a super planner. And so I was like, oh,
Right.
everything's planned. I can't go.
I'm the same way. It was a little last minute for sure, but it was so fun. It was the first time that I had done that specific topic. And so it was a good presentation, and I feel like good things I learned for kind of building on it to hopefully do it more in the future.
I think that's a really important topic and something if anyone who works in gender at all, that you're going to talk about dysphoria a lot.
Yes.
So that's definitely something we all need to talk more about and understand more. Yeah.
Well, and just finding all the like little ways that you can foster the euphoria, I mean, in session. Yeah.
So if you do a training on that, let us know.
I will.
Put the word out. That's a training.
Definitely. Yay.
Let's talk a little bit about the repetitive behaviors.
Body focused repetitive behaviors.
Yeah, and then we can end with your own personal experience with some of these gender conflicts. Yeah. Definitely. So tell us a little bit about the body focused repetitive behaviors, and maybe what are some of the treatments that you find effective?
Oh, yeah. Good question. So body-focused repetitive behaviors, for anybody that's not familiar, which I was not several years ago, is kind of the umbrella term for things like trichotillomania or dermatillomania, which is that compulsive hair pulling or skin picking. And I'm trying to remember like what even got me interested in this. And I honestly don't even know that I recall exactly. Maybe I had a client at some point in my first couple of years of practice who was experiencing it, but there was a conference that I was able to attend that had some really great training, and so have been able to kind of build on that. I only have a couple of clients at this point that have BFRBs, and that we're working on that like really consciously and concretely, but it's such fun work. I really enjoy it. The kind of sort of like field-wide supported treatment for BFRBs is called COMB, Comprehensive Behavior. This is another one. Too many of these acronyms. Comprehensive, I think it's behavioral treatment for BFRBs, but people call it COMB. And it's a really behavioral, it's kind of like if CBT and exposure response prevention kind of had a little like BFRB focused love child. And so it's so concrete, fairly like manualized to a certain extent in a way that is so different from, I think, what therapy feels like for the most part day to day for me. And so that work is so fun because it's the one where I have all these like worksheets and clients are taking data, and there's so many good resources on the market as well now. And so I have like apps where clients can take their BFRB, like they're pulling or they're picking data and send it like a report to me. It's amazing. Which is really cool. And so, it's just really fun. It's hard work. I mean, BFRBs are tough because at this point, we have ongoing research about the best combination of medications and treatment, as well as like social support and structural, support. But it's still a diagnosis that most folks see as an ongoing process, and one that acceptance is a huge part of, and so for a lot of folks that means that, I'm probably going to have a shaved head for a lot of my life, or I will learn to sort of be okay with X, Y, and Z. And so it can be a hard, understandably hard sell for a lot of clients to kind of look at, like, these are our treatment options, and this is probably something that will always need to be worked on, at least as far as we are research-wise now. But it's really interesting work, and so much more prevalent, I think, than perhaps people understand. I don't know if you watched it, and I can't even remember the name of the series now, but Amy Schumer had a series on, I think it was on Amazon or Hulu, in which at the end of the season, her character came out as having trichotillomania, and she disclosed in her own life that was a very personal experience for her, and that she has trich. And so it's just like things that you don't expect to hear from people and are so much more common. It's also interesting navigating socially, finding hairstylists, finding, folks that are maybe familiar with this, not even necessarily in a way that's like, yeah, I'm trained in giving you a cut that sort of, helps cover this bald spot, but even just folks that aren't shocked and shaming about like pulling behaviors in particular. So it's a really interesting population.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is so much more common than we realize.
Yes. There's a great organization, if a resource for BFRBs and sort of where I go. Honestly, I don't even know of any other big organizations because this is such a prevalent one, is TLC. I believe it's TLC Foundation. And I'm no longer a member, but was previously, and they have conferences every year, and their conference is amazing because it is, at least historically, at the time that I went, which was probably around 2015, 2016, like 80% individuals and kids with BFRBs and only like 20% professionals. And so you are just doing so much more work in the structural kind of educational way of just listening to other people's experiences and, being with folks that experience pulling and picking. It was just a really unique environment, I thought. Yeah.
And yes, I will also link to that. That sounds
awesome.
Very helpful for anybody, who might, again, when you're doing community-based work, people show up and you're like, I don't know, what is that? Let's figure it out.
Yes, right? Definitely. Oh my goodness.
Having resources like this, I'd like to have for someone who might be like, I have a client with this and I don't know what to do about it. And okay, here we go. Where we can learn.
Absolutely. Oh, I agree. Totally.
And a lot of these things, these are not things we have to specialize in. These are things we can learn about. We can learn the protocols, right? It doesn't have to be all we do.
I do, because it's something that I'm not doing on a day-to-day basis. Like I, intermittently will have one or two clients with BFRBs, and then maybe I don't for a year. I actually have a book that I will do with the client. And so we'll sort of read this like chapter by chapter. And that's helpful for me, and I hope as well for them, because the information doesn't have to stay as fresh and like something that I'm just being able to provide this like thorough, on the spot education with. We're both doing that together, and there's activities and worksheets, and they're getting the education, and I feel more confident in them getting all the information that they need. So that's a way that I don't specialize in BFRBs, but do it and feel comfortable continuing to do so.
Sometimes it's nice to have a issue you're working on that's got real clear protocols. You're like, yes,
It really
we know what to do. This.
It feels so good. So good. I'm that way with, the few people that I see with OCD or like pure O, we do a workbook as well, just because it feels like, oh, there's so much education to be had here. Like, I want you to be getting this in and out of session. Yes. Feels very good.
Yes. Yes. Because sometimes people come in and we're like, oh, what? I don't know. What are we going to do?
Yes,
So
exactly.
Like, think about it, right? So sometimes when it's something you were like, yes, I know what we're doing. Let's do this. Sometimes that's a nice feeling to have.
I think it also is reassuring to clients too, that it's like, in between sessions, I've got like this sort of homework to do, and it really feels like clear and I hope cohesive for them.
And those are all things you've got to work on at home. Like you can't just think about it all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. That's a really interesting little niche you have there. So I
like it. Yeah, it's fun.
Doing that. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So in our last little bit, tell us a little bit about your own experience parenting, step parenting, in a gender expansive way.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a almost 2-year-old toddler. As we were talking before we started recording, is very into Elmo right now and was refusing shoes earlier this week because how dare we cover up the Elmo socks. And then I have 2 bonus kids. I have both boys, 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. And our 14-year-old is very openly and proudly trans. And we do what a lot of folks call like gender creative parenting with our toddler. And so gender creative parenting can mean different things for different people, but for us, it means that we're kind of okay with like any pronouns being used for our kid. We primarily use they, them. At school, it's a lot of he and they. At their tumbling class, it's usually she and they. It's so interesting how different like settings and clothing can influence sort of what people perceive. And my goal in doing gender creative parenting is, it's really simple in that I just think that gender is your identity. And just like I'm not assigning my child as like straight or gay or whatever the case may be before they're able to tell me. I'm just giving them the space to tell us what their gender is. I know it can feel really strange for a lot of folks. I felt really nervous about doing it. We actually were not going to do it quite so, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe like concretely, in that we were very clear with family members that like, here's sort of chromosomally what we know about this fetus as it is developing. And, we picked a name based on that, but like, we don't know what this kid's gender is going to be. And so we'll keep you posted. And then our 14-year-old actually updated us on his gender literally the week that my toddler was born. And it really like shifted perspective for us in terms of, I don't know, it was just interesting. I feel sort of almost even embarrassed or ashamed, feels like such a strong word, but I think it applies a little bit. I feel sort of embarrassed that I have done gender work for so long, but I still had just not experienced that with my own kids. And so as much as like value-wise and like intellectually, I understood what gender was, I was so nervous about the social repercussions of raising our kid in a way that like really, really solidly aligned with what I know gender to be. I was so nervous that, using they, them pronouns with our, infant would put sort of a target on their back or, make them odd in some way. Even in a place like DC, which is quite affirming and pretty open to these things, I still was just nervous about it. And so we were not using they them pronouns at first, and after we brought baby home, and our then 12-year-old, I guess, was sort of starting to present in different ways and kind of navigate some of that with him. I just felt really incongruent in how we were sort of gendering our toddler, her baby at the time. And so around like 4 or 5 months, we decided to go for it and more consistently stick with they, them pronouns and updated daycare and family members. And for the most part, it's been a really good experience. I still get anxious in certain settings about referencing my child as they, them. We still every now and then get like, do you have twins, or, that sort of thing. But for the most part, people are very laid back about it. We're great. Like the pediatrician, has like a pronoun section on, their software site. And so for the most part, it's pretty congruent there. Folks are using they, them pronouns. So it's really interesting. It's been an interesting thing to navigate for sure.
It sounds like with the gender creative parenting, you're not necessarily correcting people all the time.
No, it's really fascinating.
Big piece of the struggle for people is having to constantly correct is part of the exhaustion.
Well, frankly, I almost think of it as like, I will call it like gender full parenting, because I do love that so many folks will gender our child in different ways. And so I do feel like they get different socialization as a result. Like there's just such different interactions with my kid when they're wearing pink shoes versus brown shoes or blue shoes. And you get a lot of like, oh, sweeties and hugs and like, oh, you're so sweet when there's pink shoes on. And you get a lot of like, oh, you're so active and fun. And, what a smart kiddo when they're wearing like blue shoes. And so it's what we know about the socialization of gender. And I love and sort of am pleased, because this is what I hoped, is that my kid would be able to get both of those experiences.
I love that.
Right? It's really interesting. It's so fascinating how the clothing and hair and everything influences what their assumed gender is. Yeah.
Do you know other people who are parenting similarly around you, or are you kind of all y'all are on your own?
So initially we were on our own. There is a great book, here's another link for you, called Raising Them by Kyle Myers. And Kyle is a sociologist who specializes in gender. And they were so sweet, I guess a year and a half ago, just sort of in where they were in their life, kind of being in between teaching jobs. They opened up this great Patreon for gender creative parents. And so I think at the time they were living in like Australia. And so they were really active in building this community, and they would have book clubs every month. And so as a result, I was able to connect with a lot of other parents around the country, as well as some even semi-locally, kind of DMV area, who do a similar style of parenting, which was invaluable for feeling more comfortable and confident. One thing that I know Kyle does, where I think they live in Portland now, but I know that they organize a like gender creative sort of like play group, every so often. And I've certainly considered trying to set one of those up in DC just to meet other parents, just queer parents in general. It's a small community to begin with. And so ones that are doing this style of parenting, I think, is even smaller. And so, it's nothing like a sort of in real time being able to connect with folks, but at least there's an online community that feels really supportive.
Yeah. And that's a topic for another time too. See, we have lots of things we could talk about.
Right.
Is how gendered parenting is.
Oh my God.
Parenting spaces.
Ooh, can talk for days. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a rowdy, vocal, sweet, just wild child of a toddler, and we'll see how gender as well as all other parts of their identity turn out. But I am pretty infatuated with who they're becoming so far, as well as the other two. I mean, it's been so nice to see our 14-year-old in these last 2 years just grow so tremendously. He has such a good therapist and has really grown a lot stronger in his identity, and I think feels a lot better. And that's something that we still continue to navigate with, what is best for him and with family and friends. And yeah, it's so interesting to have that, just a little more close to home now.
Yeah. As we were kind of saying, before we started recording, like being a parent and a therapist at the same time, they inform each other so often in like very real and unexpected and transparency ways.
Yes. To say the least. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah. It's definitely changed. It's changed me as a therapist to be a parent, and hopefully being a therapist makes me a better parent.
Ditto. I feel the same way.
10 years when my kids are adults, I'll ask them.
Right? I used to be like, oh no, we don't want you to go to therapy. We're like, oh no, you're inevitably going to therapy. Like, we hope we, are doing the least damage we can, right?
Well, I feel like their generation loves therapy, right?
Yes.
Which I'm happy about. I'm like, cool, job security until I retire. Yes.
Right?
I love that they do therapy and talk about it with our friends and text their friends from therapy.
I know. I'm like, I've long have given up the notion that I'm not going to mess up. I just hope that we can all talk about the ways that we mess up,
Absolutely. I mean, I've often said when my kids become adults, if I have, inevitably screwed something up, I'll pay for it. I own it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. And I'm supposed to be the expert.
I'm trying. Exactly. No, I'm totally.
No one has done it like we're doing it before. This is new.
No, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Also, they're all different.
Like millennials are parenting. So
it's so true. I know.
We're all in it together trying to figure it out.
We really are. But these conversations, like what you're sort of fostering and creating through this outlet, are so helpful. It's affirming even in being asked some of the questions,
Yeah. I just want to show we're normal people. We have lives, and it all informs everything. And we're all just trying to do right by ourselves and our people, and maybe make the world a little bit of a better place. So,
hopefully.
We're trying. It's like the TikTok that came out with the lady pouring the water off the balcony, and there's this giant.
Yes. Exactly.
It feels like that.
I know. I'm trying to change the world one session and meme at a time. I don't know about you, but I just love getting memes sent to me by clients. It's like the best part of a therapeutic relationship.
Yes. And I can tell them on very different sides of TikTok from them.
I'm not even on TikTok. I feel so old and it's too much. There's too many videos. I can't do it.
I only did so I would know what people were talking about, but then I still don't know what they're talking about because,
I know,
I'm not
exactly.
Them, so the algorithm is different.
I know. I'm I think I saw a TikTok on the Instagram, update me. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, I love what you're doing, both personally and professionally.
Likewise.
And I can't wait to see what's next for you and how it goes. And
ditto. Thank you so much. It's really nice to have the conversation. We don't often get the chance, one, to talk about ourselves, which, again, I'm a millennial. I really love to. And two, it's just, we don't get the often, I think, especially in private practice, to just talk about sort of stepping back in the work as a whole. And so it's a really nice outlet.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.